South Dakota Dakota, 9 Sioux, Daktide Kaga, pronounced Dakota Edo Kaga, is a landlocked state in the north-central region of the United States. It is also part of the Great Plains. South Dakota is named after the Dakota Sioux tribe, which comprises a large portion of the population with 9 reservations currently in the state and has historically dominated the territory. South Dakota is the 17th largest by area, but the 5th least populous and the 5th least densely populated of the 50 United States. Pierre is the state capital, and Sioux Falls, with a population of about 213,900, is South Dakota's most populous city, 12. The state is bisected by the Missouri River, dividing South Dakota into 2 geographically and socially distinct halves, known to residents as East River and West River. 13 South Dakota is bordered by North Dakota to the north, Minnesota to the east, Iowa to the southeast, Nebraska to the south, Wyoming to the west, and Montana to the northwest. Humans have inhabited the area for several millennia, with the Sioux becoming dominant by the early 19th century. In the late 19th century, European-American settlement intensified after a gold rush in the Black Hills and the construction of railroads from the east. Encroaching miners and settlers triggered a number of Indian wars, ending with the Wounded Knee Massacre in 1890. As the southern part of the former Dakota Territory, South Dakota became a state on November 2, 1889, simultaneously with North Dakota. They are the 39th and 40th states admitted to the Union. President Benjamin Harrison shuffled the statehood papers before signing them so that no one could tell which became a state first. 14 key events in the 20th century included the Dust Bowl and Great Depression, increased federal spending during the 1940s and 1,950 seconds for agriculture and defense, and an industrialization of agriculture that has reduced family farming. Eastern South Dakota is home to most of the state's population, and the area's fertile soil is used to grow a variety of crops. West of the Missouri River, ranching is the predominant agricultural activity, and the economy is more dependent on tourism and defense spending. Most of the Native American reservations are in West River. The Black Hills, a group of low pine-covered mountains sacred to the Sioux, is in the southwest part of the state. Mount Rushmore, a major tourist destination, is there. South Dakota has a temperate continental climate, with 4 distinct seasons and precipitation levels ranging from moderate in the east to semi-arid in the west. The state's ecology features species typical of a North American grassland biome. While several Democrats have historically represented South Dakota for multiple terms in both chambers of Congress, the state government is largely controlled by the Republican Party, whose nominees have carried South Dakota in each of the last 14 presidential elections. Historically dominated by an agricultural economy and a rural lifestyle, South Dakota has recently sought to diversify its economy in other areas to both attract and retain residents. South Dakota's history and rural character still strongly influence the state's culture. History of South Dakota. Humans have lived in what is today South Dakota for several thousand years. The first inhabitants were Paleo-Indian hunter-gatherers and disappeared from the area around 5000 BC, 15 between 500 AD and 800 AD. A semi-nomadic people known as the Mound Builders lived in central and eastern South Dakota. In the 14th century, the Crow Creek Massacre occurred, in which several hundred men, women, and children were killed near the Missouri River. 16. By 1500, the Arikara or Ree had settled in much of the Missouri River Valley. 17 European contact with the area began in 1743 when the Lav-Rendrei brothers explored the region. The Lav-Rendrei group buried a plate near the site of modern-day Pierre, claiming the region for France as part of Greater Louisiana. 18. In 1762, the entire region became part of the Spanish Louisiana until 1802, 1920. By the early 19th century, the Sioux had largely replaced the Arikara as the dominant group in the area. 21 Dakota Territory. In 1803, the United States purchased the Louisiana Territory, an area that included most of South Dakota, from Napoleon Bonaparte, and President Thomas Jefferson organized the Lewis and Clark Expedition to explore the region. 22. In 1817, an American fur trading post was set up at present-day Fort Pierre, beginning continuous American settlement of the area. 23. In 1855, the U.S. Army bought Fort Pierre but abandoned it in 1857 in favor of Fort Randall to the south. 23. Settlement by Americans and Europeans was by this time increasing rapidly, and in 1858 the Yankton Sioux signed the 1858 Treaty, ceding most of present-day eastern South Dakota to the United States. 24. Deadwood Redwood, like many other Black Hills towns, was founded after the discovery of gold. Land speculators founded two of eastern South Dakota's largest present-day cities, Sioux Falls in 1856 and Yankton in 1859-25. In 1861, the Dakota Territory was established by the United States government. This initially included North Dakota, South Dakota, and parts of Montana and Wyoming. 26 settlement of the area, mostly by people from the eastern United States as well as western and northern Europe, increased rapidly. 27, especially after the completion of an eastern railway link to Yankton in 1873. 28. In 1874, gold was discovered in the Black Hills during a military expedition led by George A. Custer 2930, and miners and explorers began illegally entering land promised to the Lakota. Custer's expedition took place despite the fact that the Sioux had been granted the entire western half of present-day South Dakota West River in 1868 by the Treaty of Laramie as part of the Great Sioux Reservation. 31. The Sioux declined to grant mining rights or land in the Black Hills, and war broke out after the U.S. failed to stop white miners and settlers from entering the region. 32. Eventually the U.S. won and broke up the Great Sioux Reservation into 5 reservations, settling the Lakota there. 23. In 1980, the Supreme Court and Congress ordered compensation to be offered, but the Lakota still refused to accept it, insisting on return of their land. 33. A harvest in South Dakota. 1898. A growing population in the Dakota Territory caused political dissatisfaction between Northern and Southern Territory residents, with the southern half being always more populated. Following the territorial capital being moved from Yankton to Bismarck in the northern part, calls for dividing the territory increased. South Dakota held constitutional conventions in 1883, 1885, and 1889. 34 other accounts state that the real reason for the split was a political lure for 4 Republican senators instead of 2 from the Republican-dominated Dakota Territory, and in their push to split the territory, Republican congressmen also ignored the uncomfortable fact that much of the land in the anticipated state of South Dakota belonged to the Sioux. 35-36. Eventually, in the 1887 general election, Dakota Territory residents voted for the division, so it was divided in half, and Republican President Benjamin Harrison signed proclamations formally admitting South Dakota and North Dakota to the Union on November 2, 1889. 37, 38, 39, 40. Harrison had the papers shuffled to obscure which one was signed first, and the order went unrecorded. 40-41. On December 29, 1890, the Wounded Knee Massacre occurred on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Commonly cited as the last major armed conflict between the United States and the Lakota Sioux Nation, the massacre resulted in the deaths of at least 146 Sioux, many of them women and children. 40 to 31 U.S. soldiers were also killed in the conflict. 42. 20th century and beyond, a South Dakota farm during the Dust Bowl, 1936. Normal tillage practices turn South Dakota's fragile soil into a fine, loose powder that blows away, and sometimes covered vehicles, equipment, and buildings with dust during the Dust Bowl. 43. During the 1930s, several economic and climatic conditions combined with disastrous results for South Dakota. A lack of rainfall, extremely high temperatures, and inappropriate cultivation techniques produced what was known as the Dust Bowl in South Dakota and several other plain states. Fertile topsoil was blown away in massive dust storms, and several harvests were completely ruined. 44. The experiences of the Dust Bowl, coupled with local bank foreclosures and the general economic effects of the Great Depression, resulted in many South Dakotans leaving the state. The population of South Dakota declined by more than 7% between 1930 and 1940. 45. Economic stability returned with the U.S. entry into World War II in 1941, when demand for the state's agricultural and industrial products grew as the nation mobilized for war. 46. In 1944, the Pick-Sloan Plan was passed as part of the Flood Control Act of 1944 by the U.S. Congress, resulting in the construction of 6 large dams on the Missouri River, 4 of which are at least partially in South Dakota. 47. Flood control, hydroelectricity, and recreational opportunities such as boating and fishing are provided by the dams and their reservoirs. 47. In recent decades, South Dakota has been transformed from a state dominated by agriculture to one with a more diversified economy. The tourism industry has grown considerably since the mid-20th century, with the Black Hills becoming more important as a destination. The financial service industry began to grow in the state as well, with Citibank moving its credit card operations from New York to Sioux Falls in 1981, a move that has been followed by several other financial companies. South Dakota was the first state to eliminate caps on interest rates, 48 in 2007. The site of the recently closed Homestake gold mine near Lead was chosen as the location of a new underground research facility, the Deep Underground Science and Engineering Laboratory, 49. Despite a growing state population and recent economic development, many rural areas have been struggling over the past 50 years with locally declining populations and the emigration of educated young adults to larger South Dakota cities, such as Rapid City or Sioux Falls, or to other states. 50 Mechanization and consolidation of agriculture has contributed greatly to the declining number of smaller family farms and the resulting economic and demographic challenges facing rural towns. 51 Gallup Sharecare State of American Well-Being rankings in 2018 named South Dakota the happiest, healthiest state in the United States. 52. South Dakota is in the north-central United States and is considered a part of the Midwest by the U.S. Census Bureau. 53. It is also part of the Great Plains region. The culture, economy, and geography of western South Dakota have more in common with the West than the Midwest. 1354. South Dakota has a total area of 77,116 square miles, 199,730 km2, making the state the 17th largest in the Union. One Black Elk Peak, formerly named Harney Peak, with an elevation of 7,242 feet, 207 m, is the state's highest point, while the shoreline of Big Stone Lake is the lowest, with an elevation of 966 feet, 94 m. 3. South Dakota is bordered to the north by North Dakota, to the south by Nebraska, to the east by Iowa and Minnesota, and to the west by Wyoming and Montana. The geographical center of the U.S. is 17 miles 27 km west of Castle Rock in Butte County. 3. The North American continental pole of inaccessibility is between Allen and Kyle, 1,024 miles 1,648 km from the nearest coastline. 55. The Missouri River is the largest and longest river in the state. Other major South Dakota rivers include the Cheyenne, James, Big Sioux, and White Rivers. Eastern South Dakota has many natural lakes, mostly created by periods of glaciation. 56. Additionally, dams on the Missouri River create 4 large reservoirs: Lake Ohe, Lake Sharp, Lake Francis Case, and Lewis and Clark Lake. 57. Regions and geology. South Dakota can generally be divided into 3 regions: Eastern South Dakota, Western South Dakota, and the Black Hills. 58. The Missouri River serves as a boundary in terms of geographic, social, and political differences between eastern and western South Dakota. The geography of the Black Hills, long considered sacred by Native Americans, differs from its surroundings to such an extent it can be considered separate from the rest of western South Dakota. At times, the Black Hills are combined with the rest of western South Dakota, and people often refer to the resulting 2 regions divided by the Missouri River as West River and East River. 1354. Badlands National Park. Eastern South Dakota generally features higher precipitation and lower topography than the western part of the state. Smaller geographic regions of this area include the Coteau des Prairies, the Dissected Till Plains, and the James River Valley. The Coteau des Prairies is a plateau bordered on the east by the Minnesota River Valley and on the west by the James River Basin. 56. Further west, the James River Basin is mostly low, flat, highly eroded land, following the flow of the James River through South Dakota from north to south. 59. The Dissected Till Plains, an area of rolling hills and fertile soil that covers much of Iowa and Nebraska, extends into the southeastern corner of South Dakota. Layers deposited during the Pleistocene epoch, starting around 2 million years ago, cover most of eastern South Dakota. 60. These are the youngest rock and sediment layers in the state, the product of several successive periods of glaciation which deposited a large amount of rocks and soil, known as till, over the area. 61. The Great Plains cover most of the western 2/3 of South Dakota. West of the Missouri River, the landscape becomes more arid and rugged, consisting of rolling hills, plains, ravines, and steep flat-topped hills called buttes. 62. In the south, east of the Black Hills, lie the South Dakota Badlands. Erosion from the Black Hills, marine skeletons which fell to the bottom of a large shallow sea that once covered the area, and volcanic material all contribute to the geology of this area. 60. 63. 64. The Black Hills, a low mountain range, is located in southwestern South Dakota. The Black Hills are in the southwestern part of South Dakota and extend into Wyoming. This range of low mountains covers 6,000 sq mi 16,000 km2, with peaks that rise from 2,000 to 4,000 feet 600 to 1,200 meters above their bases. The Black Hills are the location of Black Elk Peak 7,242 ft or 2,207 meters above sea level, the highest point in South Dakota and also the highest point in the United States east of the 2-billion-year-old Precambrian formations. The oldest rocks in the state form the central core of the Black Hills. 65 formations from the Paleozoic era form the outer ring of the Black Hills. 66 these were created between roughly 540 and 250 million years ago. This area features rocks such as limestone, which were deposited here when the area formed the shoreline of an ancient inland sea. 66. Ecology. Much of South Dakota except for the Black Hills area is dominated by a temperate grassland biome. 67. Although grasses and crops cover most of this region, deciduous trees such as cottonwoods, elms, and willows are common near rivers and in shelter belts. 68. Mammals in this area include bison, deer, pronghorn, coyotes, and prairie dogs. 69. The state bird, the ring-necked pheasant, has adapted well to the area after being introduced from China. 70. Growing populations of bald eagles are spread throughout the state, especially near the Missouri River. 71. Rivers and lakes of the grasslands support populations of walleye, carp, pike, bass, and other species. 69. The Missouri River also contains the prehistoric paddlefish. 72. Due to a higher elevation and level of precipitation, the Black Hills ecology differs significantly from that of the plains. 73. The mountains are thickly blanketed by various types of pines, including ponderosa and lodgepole pines, as well as spruces. 74. Black Hills mammals include deer, elk wapiti, bighorn sheep, mountain goats, pine marten, and mountain lions, while the streams and lakes contain several species of trout. 74. 75. 76. Climate. See also, climate change in South Dakota. South Dakota has a continental climate with 4 distinct seasons, ranging from cold, dry winters to warm and semi-humid summers. During the summers, the state's average high temperature is often close to 90 F30 C, although it cools to near 60 F16 C at night. It is not unusual for South Dakota to have severe hot, dry spells in the summer with the temperature climbing above 100 F38 C several times a year. 77. Winters are cold with January high temperatures averaging below freezing and low temperatures averaging below 10 F12 C in most of the state. The highest recorded temperature is 120 F49 C at Usta on July 15, 2006-78, and the lowest recorded temperature is -58 F50 C at McIntosh on February 17, 1936. 79. Average annual precipitation in South Dakota ranges from semi-arid conditions in the northwestern part of the state around 15 inches or 380 millimeters to semi-humid around the southeast portion of the state around 25 inches or 640. 77. Although a small area centered on Lead in the Black Hills has the highest precipitation at nearly 30 inches 76 per year, 80. South Dakota summers bring frequent, sometimes severe, thunderstorms with high winds, thunder, and hail. The state's eastern part is often considered part of Tornado Alley. 81. And South Dakota experiences an average of 30 tornadoes each year. 80. To severe blizzards and ice storms often occur during winter. Mount Rushmore in the Black Hills, South Dakota has several sites administered by the National Park Service. 2 national parks have been established in the state, both in its southwestern region. Wind Cave National Park, established in 1903 in the Black Hills, has an extensive cave network and is home to a large herd of bison. 87. Badlands National Park was established in 1978-88 and features an eroded, brightly colored landscape surrounded by semi-arid grasslands. 89. Mount Rushmore National Memorial in the Black Hills was established in 1925. The sculpture of 4 U.S. presidents was carved into the mountainside by sculptor Gutzon Borglum. 90. Other areas managed by the National Park Service include Jewel Cave National Monument near Custer, the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail, the Minuteman Missile National Historic Site, which features a decommissioned nuclear missile silo and a separate missile control area several miles away, and the Missouri National Recreational River. 91. The Crazy Horse Memorial is a large mountainside sculpture near Mount Rushmore being built using private funds. 92. The Mammoth site near Hot Springs is another privately owned attraction in the Black Hills. It is a working paleontological dig and has one of the world's largest concentrations of mammoth remains, 93. Population. At the 2022 estimate, South Dakota's population was 909,824 on July 1, 2022, a 2.61% increase since the 2020 United States Census. 96 in 2020. 6.5% of South Dakota's population was reported as under 5, 24.5% under 18, and 17.7% were females. Made up approximately 49.7% of the population. 97 as of the 2020 census, South Dakota ranked 5th lowest in the nation in population and population density. Only North Dakota, Alaska, Vermont, and Wyoming have fewer residents. Of the people residing in South Dakota, 65.7% were born in South Dakota, 31.4% were born in another U.S. state, 0.6% were born in Puerto Rico, U.S. island areas, or born abroad to American parents, and 2.3% were born in another country. 98. The top countries of origin for South Dakota's immigrants and refugees in 2018 were Guatemala, the Philippines, Mexico, Sudan, and Ethiopia. 99. The center of population of South Dakota is in Buffalo County, in the unincorporated county seat of Gan Valley. 100. According to HUD's 2022 Annual Homeless Assessment Report, there were an estimated 1,389 homeless people in South Dakota. 101-102. Ethnicity for the remainder of the population is not similarly accounted by the federal government. 105. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 25.4% of South Dakota's population younger than age 1 were minorities as of 2011, meaning they had at least one parent who was not non-Hispanic white. 109-110. As of 2000, the 5 largest ancestry groups in South Dakota are German 47, Norwegian 15, 3, Irish 10, 4, Native American 8, 3, and English 7, 1. 111. German Americans are the largest ancestry group in most parts of the state, especially in East River east of the Missouri River, although there are also large Scandinavian-descended populations in some counties. South Dakota has the nation's largest population of Hutterites. 112. A communal Anabaptist group which emigrated in 1874 from German-speaking villages in what today is Ukraine, but at that time was part of the Russian Empire. American Indians, largely Lakota, Dakota, and Dakota Sioux, are predominant in several counties and constitute 20% of the population in West River. The 7 large Indian reservations in the state occupy an area much diminished from their former Great Sioux Reservation of West River, which the federal government had once allocated to the Sioux tribes. South Dakota has the 3rd highest proportion of Native Americans of any state, behind Alaska and New Mexico. 1135 of the state's counties are wholly within the boundaries of sovereign Indian reservations. 114. Because of the limitations of climate and land, and isolation from urban areas with more employment opportunities, living standards on many South Dakota reservations are often far below the national average. Ziebach County ranked as the poorest county in the nation in 2009. 115. The unemployment rate in Fort Thompson, on the Crow Creek Reservation, is 70%, and 21% of households lack plumbing or basic kitchen appliances. 116. A 1995 study by the U.S. Census Bureau found 58% of homes on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation did not have a telephone. 117. The reservation's isolation also inhibits their ability to generate revenue from gaming casinos, an avenue that has proved profitable for many tribes closer to urban centers. Languages. In 1995, the legislature passed a law to make English the common language of the state. 118. Since 2019, the language of the Great Sioux Nation, comprised of 3 dialects, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, is the official indigenous language. 76. As of the 2000 census, 1.9% of the population age 5 or older speak German at home, while 1.51% speak Lakota or Dakota, and 1.43% Spanish. 119. As of 2010, 93.46% 692, 504 of South Dakota residents age 5 and older spoke English as their primary language. 6.54% of the population spoke a language other than English. 2.06% 15, 292 of the population spoke Spanish, 1.39% 10, 282 spoke Dakota, and 1.37% 10, 140 spoke German. Other languages spoken included Vietnamese 16, Chinese 12, and Russian 10. 120 growth and rural flight. Over the last several decades, the population in many rural areas has declined in South Dakota, in common with other Great Plains states. The change has been characterized as rural flight as family farming has declined. Young people have moved to cities for other employment. This trend has continued in recent years, with 30 of South Dakota's counties losing population between the 1990 and the 2000 census, 1-to-1. During that time, 9 counties had a population loss of greater than 10%, with Hardin County, in the northwest corner of the state, losing nearly 19% of its population. 1-to-1 low birth rates and a lack of younger immigration has caused the median age of many of these counties to increase. In 24 counties, at least 20% of the population is over the age of 65, 1-to-2 compared with a national rate of 12.8%. The effect of rural flight has not been spread evenly through South Dakota, however. Although most rural counties and small towns have lost population, the Sioux Falls area, the larger counties along Interstate 29, the Black Hills, and many Indian reservations have all gained population, 1-to-1 as the reservations have exercised more sovereignty. Some Sioux have returned to them from urban areas. 1-to-3 Lincoln County near Sioux Falls was the 7th fastest growing county by percentage in the United States in 2010, 1-to-4. The growth in these areas has compensated for losses in the rest of the state. 1-to-1 South Dakota's total population continues to increase steadily, albeit at a slower rate than the national average. A one-night stay in South Dakota is all that is necessary to qualify a person to claim residency in South Dakota. Residency in South Dakota has therefore become very popular among full-time travelers, persons who reside in recreational vehicles, aboard cruise ships, etc. 1-to-5. Religion, religious self-identification, per Public Religion Research Institute's 2022 American Values Survey. 1-to-6 Christianity 72, unaffiliated 21, Buddhism 3, New Age 3, other 10. According to the Public Religion Research Institute in 2020, 73% of the adult population were Christian, 1-to-7 per the Pew Research Center's separate 2014 study. The largest religious denominations in Christianity by number of adherents as a percentage of South Dakota's population in 2014 were the Catholic Church with 22%, Evangelical Protestants with 25%, and Mainline Protestants with 32%. Together, all kinds of Protestants accounted for 57%. Those unaffiliated with any religion represented 18% of the population. The breakdown of other religions was 1 Muslim, 1 Hindu, and 1% Buddhist, 1-to-8. Through the Association of Religion Data Archives in 2020, Catholicism remained the largest Christian denomination, followed by the ELCA. Non-denominational Protestants numbered 63,992, becoming the third largest group of Christians throughout the state. 131 in 2022, the Public Religion Research Institute determined 72% of the state were Christian altogether, though Protestants were 48%, Catholics 22%, and Jehovah's Witnesses 2%. The religiously unaffiliated declined from 22% to 21% between 2020 and 2022. Other non-Christian faith groups with a substantial presence in the South Dakota were Buddhism 3, New Age 3, and others at 1% altogether. Through the Association of Religion Data Archives 2020 study, there were 978 adherents to the Baha'i faith and 535 Muslims, 131. Economy. See also, South Dakota locations by per capita income and list of power stations in South Dakota. B-1B Lancer lifts off from Ellsworth Air Force Base, one of South Dakota's largest employers. The current dollar gross state product of South Dakota was $39.8 billion as of 2010, the 5th smallest total state output in the U.S. 132. The per capita personal income was $38,865 in 2010, ranked 25th in the U.S. 133, and 12.5% of the population was below the poverty line in 2008. 13 for CNBC's list of top states for business for 2010 has recognized South Dakota as the 7th best state in the nation, 135. In July 2011, the state's unemployment rate was 4.7. 136. The service industry is the largest economic contributor in South Dakota. This sector includes the retail, finance, and healthcare industries. Citibank, which was at one time the largest bank holding company in the United States, established national banking operations in South Dakota in 1981 to take advantage of favorable banking regulations. 48. Today, the trust fund industry manages hundreds of billions of dollars and is known as tax haven for foreigners. 137. Government spending is another important segment of the state's economy, providing over 10% of the gross state product. Ellsworth Air Force Base, near Rapid City, is the second largest single employer in the state. 138. Ethanol plant in Turner County. Agriculture has historically been the key component of the South Dakota economy. Although other industries have expanded rapidly in recent decades, agricultural production is still very important to the state's economy, especially in rural areas. The 5 most valuable agricultural products in South Dakota are cattle, corn, maize, soybeans, wheat, and hogs. 139. Agriculture-related industries such as meatpacking and ethanol production also have a considerable economic impact on the state. South Dakota is the 6th leading ethanol-producing state in the nation. 140. Another important sector in South Dakota's economy is tourism. Many travel to view the attractions of the state, particularly those in the Black Hills region, such as historic Deadwood, Mount Rushmore, and the nearby state and national parks. One of the largest tourist events in the state is the annual Sturgis Motorcycle Rally. The 5-day event drew over 739,000 attendees in 2015, significant considering the state has a total population of 850,000, 141. The host unit at Ellsworth is the 28th Bomb Wing 28W. Assigned to the Global Strike Command's 8th Air Force, the 28W is one of the U.S.A.'s 2B-1B Lancer wings, along with the 7th Bomb Wing at DISAF, Texas. In 2023, the 28th Bomb Wing is commanded by Colonel Derek Oakley. To its command Chief Master Sergeant was Chief Master Sergeant Adam Vietze. 3. Ellsworth has a population of about 8,000 military members, family members, and civilian employees. Rapid City itself has a population of 78,824. There are about 3,800 military retirees in western South Dakota. Citation needed. For decades, Ellsworth's main entrance included a symbolic B-52 Stratofortress, a gift from the citizens of Rapid City. Citation needed. This entrance has recently been replaced. An expansion of a bomber training area encompassing the northern plains known as the Powder River Training Complex began in 2008. Ethanol, also called ethyl alcohol, grain alcohol, drinking alcohol, or simply alcohol, is an organic compound with the chemical formula H3H2O. It is an alcohol, with its formula also written as C2H50, C2H60, or ETO, where Et stands for ethyl. Ethanol is a volatile, flammable, colorless liquid with a characteristic wine-like odor and pungent taste. 1112. As a psychoactive depressant, it is the active ingredient in alcoholic beverages and the second most consumed drug globally behind caffeine. 13. Ethanol is naturally produced by the fermentation process of sugars by yeasts or via petrochemical processes such as ethylene hydration. Historically, it was used as a general anesthetic and has modern medical applications as an antiseptic, disinfectant, solvent for some medications, and antidote for methanol poisoning and ethylene glycol poisoning. 1415. It is used as a chemical solvent and in the synthesis of organic compounds, and as a fuel source for lamps, stoves, and internal combustion engines. Ethanol also can be dehydrated to make ethylene, an important chemical feedstock. As of 2023, world production of ethanol fuel was 112.0 gigaliters to 96,1010 US gallons, coming mostly from the US 51 and Brazil 26.16. Transportation Man article, Transportation in South Dakota. Also, List of South Dakota railroads and List of South Dakota numbered highways. Beaver Creek Bridge in Wind Cave National Park, South Dakota has 83,609 miles 134,556 km of highways, roads, and streets, along with 679 miles 1,093 km of interstate highways. 1,432 major interstates pass through South Dakota. Interstate 90, which runs east and west through the southern half of the state, and Interstate 29, running north and south in the eastern portion of the state. The I-29 corridor features generally higher rates of population and economic growth than areas in eastern South Dakota further from the interstate. 1-1 also in the state are the shorter interstates 190, a spur into central Rapid City, and 229, a loop around southern and eastern Sioux Falls. Several major U.S. highways pass through the state. U.S. routes 12, 14, 16, 18, and 212 travel east and west, while U.S. routes 81, 83, 85, and 281 run north and south. South Dakota and Montana are the only states sharing a land border that is not traversed by a paved road. South Dakota contains two national scenic byways. The Peter Norbeck National Scenic Byway is in the Black Hills, while the Native American Scenic Byway runs along the Missouri River in the north-central part of the state. 144 other scenic byways include the Badlands Loop Scenic Byway, the Spearfish Canyon Scenic Byway, and the Wildlife Loop Road Scenic Byway. Railroads have played an important role in South Dakota transportation since the mid-19th century. Some 4,420 miles 7,110 km of railroad track were built in South Dakota during the late 19th century and early 20th century, 145 but only 1,839 miles 2,960 km are active. 146 BNSF is the largest railroad in South Dakota. The Rapid City, Pierre and Eastern Railroad, formerly the Dakota, Minnesota and Eastern, is the state's other major carrier. 146. Other state carriers include Dakota Southern Railway, D&I Railroad, Ellis and Eastern, Sunflower Railroad, CPCACKCCCCCCC, and the Siston Millbank Railroad. Rail transportation in the state is mostly freight, but there are two passenger heritage railroads, the Black Hills Central and the Prairie Village, Herman, and Milwaukee. However, South Dakota is one of the two contiguous states that lack Amtrak service. South Dakota is the only contiguous state that never had Amtrak. Wyoming used to be served by the San Francisco Zephyr and the Pioneer. 147 South Dakota's largest commercial airports in terms of passenger traffic are the Sioux Falls Regional Airport and Rapid City Regional Airport. Delta Airlines, Frontier Airlines, and Allegiant Airlines, as well as commuter airlines using the brand affiliation with major airlines, serve the two largest airports. Several other cities in the state also have commercial air service: Aberdeen Regional Airport, Pierre Regional Airport, and Watertown Regional Airport, some of which are subsidized by the Essential Air Service Program. 148 Public transit played a large role in the development of cities in South Dakota. There were 7 cities with a streetcar system in the 19th and 20th centuries. However, all of these were discontinued over time. Today, only 3 fixed-route public transit systems exist in the state, those being in Sioux Falls, Rapid City, and on the Yankton Reservation. The Dwight D. Eisenhower National System of Interstate and Defense Highways, commonly known as the Interstate Highway System or the Eisenhower Interstate System, is a network of controlled access highways that forms part of the National Highway System in the United States. The system extends throughout the contiguous United States and has roots in Hawaii, Alaska, and Puerto Rico. In the 20th century, the United States Congress began funding roadways through the Federal Aid Road Act of 1916 and started an effort to construct a national road grid with the passage of the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1921. In 1926, the United States Numbered Highway System was established, creating the first national road numbering system for cross-country travel. The roads were funded and maintained by U.S. states, and there were few national standards for road design. United States numbered highways ranged from 2-lane country roads to multi-lane freeways. After Dwight D. Eisenhower became president in 1953, his administration developed a proposal for an interstate highway system, eventually resulting in the enactment of the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. Unlike the earlier United States numbered highway system, the interstates were designed to be all freeways, with nationally unified standards for construction and signage. While some older freeways were adopted into the system, most of the routes were completely new. In the 2 decades following the 1956 Highway Act, the construction of the freeways displaced 1 million people, and as a result of the many freeway revolts during this era, several planned interstates were abandoned or rerouted to avoid urban cores. Construction of the original interstate highway system was proclaimed complete in 1992, despite deviations from the original 1956 plan and several stretches that did not fully conform with federal standards. The construction of the interstate highway system cost approximately $114 billion, equivalent to $618 billion in 2023. The system has continued to expand and grow as additional federal funding has provided for new routes to be added, and many future interstate highways are currently either being planned or under construction. Though heavily funded by the federal government, interstate highways are owned by the state in which they were built. With few exceptions, all interstates must meet specific standards, such as having controlled access, physical barriers or median strips between lanes of oncoming traffic, breakdown lanes, avoiding at-grade intersections, no traffic lights, and complying with federal traffic sign specifications. Interstate highways use a numbering scheme in which primary interstates are assigned 1. or 2-digit numbers, and shorter routes which branch off from longer ones are assigned 3-digit numbers where the last 2 digits match the parent route. The interstate highway system is partially financed through the Highway Trust Fund, which itself is funded by a combination of a federal fuel tax and transfers from the Treasury's General Fund. 5. Though federal legislation initially banned the collection of tolls, some interstate routes are toll roads either because they were grandfathered into the system or because subsequent legislation has allowed for tolling of interstates in some cases. In the state of South Dakota, I-29 traverses on the eastern side of the state from the Iowa border near Sioux City to the North Dakota border near New Effington. On its route, I-29 passes through western portions of Sioux Falls, the state's largest city. It travels 252.5 miles 406 km in the state, the longest stretch of any of the 4 states through which it passes. 1. I-229, the highway's lone auxiliary route in South Dakota, serves as a bypass around southern and eastern Sioux Falls. Route description: South Dakota section of I-29 is defined in South Dakota Consolidated Laws 314152. All of I-29 in South Dakota is included in the National Highway System. 3. A system of highways important to the nation's defense, economy, and mobility. 4. Average daily traffic volume on I-29 in South Dakota is relatively low by interstate highway standards. Most segments of I-29 outside of Sioux Falls receive between 5,000 and 20,000 vehicles per day, with numbers as high as 50,000 being reported in Sioux Falls. 5. The speed limit on I-29 in South Dakota is 80 miles per hour 130 km per hour on most segments, but 65 miles per hour 105 km per hour in Dakota Dunes and North Sioux City from the Iowa state line to exit 4, in T from exit 73 to exit 75, and in Sioux Falls from exit 75. The United States numbered highway system, often called U.S. routes or U.S. highways, is an integrated network of roads and highways numbered within a nationwide grid in the contiguous United States. As the designation and numbering of these highways were coordinated among the states, they are sometimes called federal highways, but the roadways were built and have always been maintained by state or local governments since their initial designation in 1926. The route numbers and locations are coordinated by the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, AASHTO. For the only federal involvement in AASHTO is a non-voting seat for the United States Department of Transportation. Generally, most north to south highways are odd-numbered, with the lowest numbers in the east and the highest in the west, while east to west highways are typically even-numbered, with the lowest numbers in the north and the highest in the south, though the grid guidelines are not rigidly followed, and many exceptions exist. Major north-south routes generally have numbers ending in 1, while major east-west routes usually have numbers ending in 0. 1C 3-digit numbered highways are generally spur routes of parent highways. For example, U.S. Route 264 US 264 is a spur off US 64. Some divided routes, such as US 19E and US 19W, exist to provide 2 alignments for one route. Special routes, which can be labeled as alternate, bypass, or business, depending on the intended use, provide a parallel routing to the mainline U.S. highway. Before the U.S. routes were designated, auto trails designated by auto trail associations were the main means of marking roads through the United States. These were private organizations, and the system of road marking at the time was haphazard and not uniform. In 1925, the Joint Board on Interstate Highways, recommended by the American Association of State Highway Officials (AASHTO), worked to form a national numbering system to rationalize the roads. After several meetings, a final report was approved by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in November 1925. Expansion of the U.S. highway system continued until 1956, when the interstate highway system was laid out and began construction under the administration of President Dwight D. Eisenhower. In some places, the U.S. routes remain alongside the interstates and serve as a means for interstate travelers to access local services and as secondary feeder roads or as important major arteries in their own right. In other places, where there are no nearby interstate highways, the U.S. routes often remain as the most well-developed roads for long-distance travel. A National Scenic Byway is a road recognized by the United States Department of Transportation for one or more of 6 intrinsic qualities: archaeological, cultural, historic, natural, recreational, and scenic. The program was established by Congress in 1991 to preserve and protect the nation's scenic but often less traveled roads and promote tourism and economic development. The National Scenic Byways Program's BP is administered by the Federal Highway Administration (FWA). Some scenic byways are designated All-American roads, which must meet 2 out of the 6 intrinsic qualities. The designation means they have features that do not exist elsewhere in the United States and are unique and important enough to be tourist destinations unto themselves. As of January 21, 2021, there are 184 national scenic byways located in 48 states, all except Hawaii and Texas, too. The Peter Norbeck Scenic Byway is a national scenic byway in the Black Hills National Forest in the southwestern part of the U.S. state of South Dakota. It is a loop which is composed of portions of U.S. Route 16 US 16A, South Dakota Highway 244 SD 244, SD 87, and SD 89. Parts of the byway enter Black Hills National Forest, Custer State Park, and the Mount Rushmore National Memorial. The byway also travels within 5 miles 8.0 kilometers of the Crazy Horse Memorial. The byway is named after Peter Norbeck, who served as governor of and senator for South Dakota. A spur route is a short road forming a branch from a longer, more important road such as a freeway, interstate highway, or motorway. A bypass or beltway is not considered a spur route as it typically reconnects with another or the same major road. U.S. Route 212 US 212 is a spur of US 12. It runs for 949 miles 5 to 7 km from Yellowstone National Park to Minnesota Highway 62 at Edina, Minnesota. It does not intersect US 12 now, but it once had an eastern terminus at US 12 in Steedy Paul, Minnesota. US 212 passes through the states of Minnesota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana. It goes through the cities of Watertown, South Dakota, and Billings, Montana. U.S. Route 281 US 281 is a north-south United States numbered highway. At 1,875 miles 3,018 km 3. It is the longest continuous 3-digit U.S. route. The highway's northern terminus is at the International Peace Garden, north of Dunseith, North Dakota, at the Canadian border, where it continues as Highway 10. The route between Dunseith and the border is shared with North Dakota Highway 3. US 281 has two southern termini. The western terminus, known as International Boulevard, in Hidalgo, begins from the McClellan-Hidalgo International Bridge. The southern-eastern terminus of US 281 is in Brownsville, Texas, just short of the Mexican border, ending on Bus 77. The two spurs come together at South Cage Boulevard in Las Milpas, Texas, going north into Far, Texas. Thus, US 281 is the only continuous 3-digit US route to extend from the Canadian border to the Mexican border. The original military telegraph road was incorporated into the US 281 route, for US 281 is a child of US 81. As a result of decommissioning portions of the parent route that have been superseded by concurrent interstate highways, the length of US 281 is 672 miles 1,081 km greater than that of its parent. US 281 no longer connects to its parent, US 81. BNSF Railway reporting mark BNSF is the largest freight railroad in the United States, one of 6 North American class I railroads. BNSF has 36,000 employees, 133,400 miles 53,800 km of track in 28 states, and over 8,000 locomotives, too. It has 3 transcontinental routes that provide rail connections between the western and eastern United States. BNSF trains traveled over 169 million miles 272 million kilometers in 2010, more than any other North American railroad. 3. The BNSF Railway Company is the principal operating subsidiary of parent company Burlington Northern Santa Fe, LLC. Headquartered in Fort Worth, Texas, the railroad's parent company is a wholly owned subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway, Inc., of Omaha, Nebraska. 4. The current CEO is Catherine Farmer. 5. According to corporate press releases, BNSF Railway is among the top transporters of intermodal freight in North America. It also hauls bulk cargo, including coal. The creation of BNSF started with the formation of a holding company on September 22, 1995. This new holding company purchased the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway, often called the Santa Fe and Burlington Northern Railroad, and formally merged the railways into the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Railway on December 31, 1996. On January 24, 2005, the railroad's name was officially changed to BNSF Railway Company using the initials of its original name. 7. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway acquired BNSF Railway in February 2010, obtaining all of its shares and taking the company private. BNSF and its chief competitor, the Union Pacific Railroad, have a duopoly on all transcontinental freight rail lines in the western, midwestern, and southern United States and share trackage rights over thousands of miles of track. Rapid City, Pierre and Eastern Railroad reporting Mark Arkby is a Class II freight railroad operating across South Dakota and southern Minnesota in the northern plains of the United States. Portions of the railroad also extend into Wyoming and Nebraska. It is owned and operated by Genesee and Wyoming. The primary commodities shipped are grain, clay, and cement. 1. Operations began on June 1, 2014, to the Dakota, Minnesota and Eastern Railroad reporting Mark D. is a wholly owned U.S. subsidiary of the Canadian Pacific Kansas City. 1. Before its purchase, it was the largest Class II railroad in the United States, 2 operating across South Dakota and southern Minnesota in the northern plains of the United States. Portions of the railroad also extended into Wyoming, Nebraska, Iowa, and Illinois. It interchanged with all 7 U.S. Class I railroads. The DM&E began operations on September 5, 1986, over trackage spun off from the Chicago and Northwestern Transportation Company in South Dakota and Minnesota. The DM&E purchased the assets of I&M Rail Link Railroad in 2002, renaming it Iowa, Chicago and Eastern Railroad. DM&E combined its management and dispatching duties with those of ICE under the holding company Cedar American Rail Holdings. The combined system connected Chicago through Iowa to Kansas City, Minneapolis-St. Paul, and continued west to Rapid City, South Dakota. Smaller branches extended into Wisconsin, Wyoming, and Nebraska. 3. In September 2007, it was announced that Canadian Pacific Railway would acquire the DM&E upon approval by the Surface Transportation Board of the U.S. Department of Transportation. The STT announced its approval of the purchase plan on September 30, 2008. 4, 5, 6 lines west of Tracy, Minnesota were sold to Genesee and Wyoming in 2014 to form the Rapid City, Pierre and Eastern Railroad. 7. The Dakota Southern Railway reporting Mark DSRC was a railroad that until late May 2021 ran 189.7 miles 3 km between Kadoka, South Dakota, and Mitchell, South Dakota, and which continued to service the approximately 10 miles 16 km of remaining active track of the Napa Junction Platte Line in southern South Dakota. 1-2. It connected with the BNSF Railway in Mitchell and Napa Junction respectively. 3. The D&I Railroad Dare is a Class III shortline railroad which is a wholly owned subsidiary of LG Everest, Inc. The line hauls ethanol, dried distillers grains DDG, corn oil, 3 plastic pellets, cement, sand, gravel, and Sioux quartzite, which is mined from 2 large quarries in Dell Rapids. 4. The D&I has a trackage rights agreement with BNSF that allows it to travel on 3 BNSF subdivisions to deliver and sell products, as they must use BNSF's system to reach their southern half of their trackage. The D&I operates on both former Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul and Pacific Railroad and Chicago and Northwestern Railroad trackage, which were handed over to the state of South Dakota in 1980 to 1981 after the Milwaukee Road's bankruptcy and subsequent abandonment of unprofitable lines. Operating on former Chicago and Northwestern CNU trackage. 1. It was formed to ship Sioux quartzite and other materials such as sand and gravel from a large quarry in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, for Sweetman Construction Company, which uses the railroad primarily to ship materials from the quarry it operates to a concrete plant nearby. 1. Over time, the Ellis and Eastern has shipped more diverse products such as lumber, chemicals, machinery, scrap metals, and grain to other customers. 1. The Sunflower Railroad reporting Mark SNR is a short-line railroad which owns trackage in Roberts County and Marshall County, South Dakota. 1. The company owns approximately 19 route miles of track between the towns of Rosholt and Clare City. The line connects with the Canadian Pacific Railway at Rosholt. 1. The Prairie Village, Herman and Milwaukee Railroad is a heritage railroad in Prairie Village, South Dakota, which is next to Lake Herman. It operates from May to September. 1. The railroad uses former Milwaukee Road trackage as its 2-mile line, and it operates one of the few remaining church railroad cars, the Emmanuel. It is also staffed entirely by volunteers. They operate 2 diesel engines, but have also set up steam engines for events. 2, 3, 4, 5. The San Francisco Zephyr was an Amtrak passenger train that ran between Chicago and Oakland from June 1972 to July 1983, when it was renamed to the California Zephyr. The Pioneer was an Amtrak long-distance passenger train that ran between Seattle and Chicago via Portland, Boise, Salt Lake City, and Denver. Operating from 1977 to 1997, the Pioneer was the last passenger rail route to serve Wyoming, southern Idaho, or eastern Oregon. Rail advocates have been pushing for restoration of the Pioneer, though in 2021 Amtrak omitted the route from its 15-year expansion vision. 1-2. Sioux Falls Regional Airport IATA SSED, ICAO, KFSD, FAA LID, SSED. 3 also known as Joe Foss Field. 2 is a public and military use airport 3 miles northwest of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, United States. 2. It is named in honor of aviator and Sioux Falls native Joe Foss, who later served as the 20th governor of South Dakota 1955-1959. The National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems for 2011 to 2015 categorized it as a primary commercial service airport since it has over 10,000 passenger boardings and enplanements per year. Federal Aviation Administration records say the airport had 423,288 enplanements in calendar year 2011, an increase of 18.92% from 355,939 in 2010. Joe Foss Field Air National Guard Station is home to headquarters, South Dakota Air National Guard and its 114th Fighter Wing 11 for FW. The 114 FW is an Air Combat Command gained unit known as the Fighting Lobos and operates F-16CD aircraft. The South Dakota Adjutant General is based in Camp Rapid in Rapid City, South Dakota, but the South Dakota Air National Guard is effectively headquartered with the 114 FW. Rapid City Regional Airport IATA, RAP, ICAO, CRAP, FAA LID. RAP is a public-use airport 9 miles southeast of Rapid City, in Pennington County, South Dakota, United States. 2. It is included in the Federal Aviation Administration FAA National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems for 2023 to 2027, in which it is categorized as a small hub primary commercial service facility. 4. It is the closest commercial airport to Mount Rushmore, located approximately 31.7 miles 51 km away by driving distance, and is the main gateway airport to the Black Hills. Delta Airlines, Inc. is a major airline in the United States headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, operating 9 hubs, with Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport being its largest in terms of total passengers and number of departures. With its regional subsidiaries and contractors operating under the brand name Delta Connection, Delta has over 5,400 flights daily and serve 325 destinations in 52 countries on 6 continents. Delta is a founding member of the SkyTeam Airline Alliance, which helps to extend its global network. 7. It is the oldest operating U.S. airline and the 7th oldest operating worldwide. 8. Delta ranks first in revenue and brand value among the world's largest airlines, and second by number of passengers carried, passenger miles flown, and fleet size. 9. Listed 70th on the Fortune 500 list. 10. Delta has topped the Wall Street Journal's annual rankings of airlines in 2022, 2023, and 2024, and earned first place in the 2024 Reader's Choice Awards for Best Airlines in the U.S. by Condé Nast Traveler. 11. 12. Frontier Group Holdings, Inc., doing business as Frontier Airlines, is a major American ultra-low-cost airline 20 headquartered in Denver, Colorado. It operates flights to over 120 destinations in the United States, Caribbean, Mexico, and Central America, and employs more than 5,000 staff. 21. The carrier is a publicly traded company and maintains bases at Denver International Airport, Orlando International Airport, and 11 other cities across the mainland United States and Puerto Rico. Allegiant Air is an American ultra-low-cost airline headquartered in Las Vegas, Nevada. The airline focuses on serving leisure traffic from small and medium-sized cities which it considers to be underserved, using an ultra-low-cost business model with minimal inclusions in fares and a greater number of add-on fees. Allegiant was founded in 1997 and is wholly owned by Allegiant Travel Company, a publicly traded company with 5,600 employees and over $2.6 billion market capitalization in 2016. 5. The airline is the 14th largest in North America. Aberdeen Regional Airport IATA, ABR, ICAO, CABR, FAA LID. ABR is a city-owned, public-use airport located 2 nautical miles 3.7 km east of the Central Business District of Aberdeen, a city in Brown County, South Dakota, United States. 1. It is mostly used for general aviation with Delta Connection as its sole commercial airline. Federal Aviation Administration records say the airport had 15,983 passenger boardings enplanements in calendar year 2008, to 13,692 in 2009, and 14,686 in 2010-3. The National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems for 2011 to 2015 categorized it as a primary commercial service airport more than 10,000 enplanements per year for Watertown Regional Airport IATA. 82. ICAO, Katy, FAA LID, 80, formerly Watertown Municipal Airport, is 2 miles northwest of Watertown in Codington County, South Dakota, United States. Won the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems for 2015 to 2019 categorized it as a non-primary commercial service facility. Federal Aviation Administration data says it had 4,348 passenger boardings enplanements in calendar year 2013, a decrease of 30.5% from 6,254 enplanements in 2012. Essential Air Service EAS is a U.S. government program enacted to guarantee that small communities in the United States, which had been served by certificated airlines prior to deregulation in 1978, maintain commercial service. Its aim is to maintain a minimal level of scheduled air service to these communities that otherwise would not be profitable. 1. The program is codified at 49 USERC 417.314.1748. The United States Department of Transportation USDOT subsidizes airlines to serve communities across the country that otherwise would not receive scheduled air service. 1. As of June 1, 2015, 159 communities in the U.S. received EAS subsidies, of which 44 were in Alaska, 2 in Hawaii, and 1 in Puerto Rico. 2. The decision as to what degree of subsidized service a community requires is made based on identifying a specific hub for the community and from there determining the number of trips, seats, and type of aircraft that are necessary to serve that hub. 1. These increases occurred despite numerous congressional measures to contain program spending. 2. The George W. Bush administration sought to reduce the cost of the program to $50 million by stricter eligibility criteria and requiring the local governments of the areas served to contribute to the cost. The Heritage Foundation argued in 2014 that rural airports should receive no federal subsidies through the Essential Air Service Program. Rather, state and local governments that value the air services should support them. 3. The Congressional Research Service has reported in 2018 that since the early 2000s, federal subsidies for the EAS have nearly tripled to almost $300 million per year. 2. By May 2023, the subsidies amounted to $394.2 million per year. 4. Government. See also Governor of South Dakota, South Dakota Legislature, and South Dakota Supreme Court. Like other U.S. states, the structure of the government of South Dakota follows the same separation of powers as the federal government, with executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The structure of the state government is laid out in the Constitution of South Dakota, the highest law in the state. The Constitution may be amended by a majority vote of both houses of the legislature or by voter initiative. 149. The Governor of South Dakota occupies the executive branch of the state government. 150. The current governor is Larry Roden, a Republican. The state constitution gives the governor the power to sign into law or veto bills passed by the state legislature, to serve as commander-in-chief of the South Dakota National Guard, to appoint a cabinet, and to commute criminal sentences or to pardon those convicted of crimes. 151-152. The governor serves for a 4-year term and may not serve more than 2 consecutive terms. 153. The state legislature is made up of 2 bodies, the Senate, which has 35 members, and the House of Representatives, with 70 members. South Dakota is divided into 35 legislative districts, 154, with voters electing 2 representatives and 1 senator per district. 154. The legislature meets for an annual session which begins on the 2nd Tuesday in January and lasts for 30 days. It also meets if a special session is called by the governor. 154. The judicial branch is made up of several levels. The state Supreme Court, with 4 justices and a chief justice, is the highest court in the state. 155. Below the Supreme Court are the circuit courts. 41 circuit judges serve in 7 judicial circuits in the state. 155. Below the circuit courts are the magistrate courts, which deal with lesser criminal and civil actions. 155. State taxes. As of 2005, South Dakota has the lowest per capita total state tax rate in the United States. 156. The state does not levy personal or corporate income taxes. 157. Inheritance taxes. 158. Or taxes on intangible personal property. The state sales tax rate is 4.2%. 159 various localities have local levies, so in some areas the rate is 6%. The state sales tax does not apply to sales to Indians on Indian reservations, but many reservations have a compact with the state. Businesses on the reservation collect the tax and the state refunds to the Indian tribes the percentage of sales tax collections relating to the ratio of Indian population to total population in the county or area affected. Ad valorem property taxes are local taxes and are a large source of funding for school systems, counties, municipalities, and other local government units. The South Dakota Special Tax Division regulates some taxes including cigarette and alcohol-related taxes. 160 Federal Representation. See also, List of United States Senators from South Dakota and List of United States Representatives from South Dakota. South Dakota is represented at the federal level by Senator John Thune, Senator Mike Rounds, and Representative Dusty Johnson. All three are Republicans. South Dakota is one of 7 states with only one seat in the U.S. House of Representatives, 161. In United States presidential elections, South Dakota is allotted 3 of 538 votes in the Electoral College, 162. As in all other states except Maine and neighboring Nebraska, South Dakota's electoral votes are granted in a winner-take-all system, 163. South Dakota politics are generally dominated by the Republican Party. Since statehood, Republicans have carried the state's electoral votes in all but 5 presidential elections: 1896, 1912 by Theodore Roosevelt's Progressive Party, 1932, 1936, and 1964. Democrat George McGovern, a native South Dakotan, failed to carry his home state in 1972. Only Alaska has been carried fewer times by a Democrat, 165-166. Additionally, a Democrat has not won the governorship since 1974. As of 2024, Republicans hold a 2-to-1 voter registration advantage over Democrats, 167, and hold supermajorities in both the State House, 168, and the State Senate, 169. Despite the state's general Republican and conservative leanings, Democrats have found success in various statewide elections, most notably in those involving South Dakota's congressional representatives in Washington. American Indians have been becoming more active in state and county electoral politics. In the 2002 election, American Indian voting carried Tim Johnson as the Democratic candidate by a margin of 532 votes, 170-171, until his electoral defeat in 2004. Senator Tom Dashley was the Senate Minority Leader and briefly its Majority Leader during Democratic control of the Senate in 2001-02. 172 other prominent South Dakota Democrats include former presidential nominees George McGovern and Hubert Humphrey. In 2016, South Dakota voted for Republican nominee Donald Trump over Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton by a margin of 30-173. In 2018, Republican Congresswoman Kristi Noem defeated Democrat Billy Sutton in the gubernatorial election by a small margin, and Republican Dusty Johnson defeated Democrat Tim Bjorkman for the state's at-large seat in the U.S. House of Representatives, 174. Noem was sworn in on January 5, 2019, making her the first female governor of the state. 175 Contemporary political issues in South Dakota include the costs and benefits of the state lottery. 176 South Dakota's relatively low rankings in education spending, particularly teacher pay. Recently, the state sales tax was increased from 4% to 4.5% to finance an increase in teacher pay. 177 And recent legislative and electoral attempts to ban abortion in the state. 178-179, a Republican-supported bill passed in March 2019, requires that all public schools display "In God We Trust" in a prominent location. 180-181 In a 2020 study, South Dakota was ranked as the 22nd hardest state for citizens to vote. Main article, Culture of South Dakota, Nicholas Black Elk with his family, circa 1910. South Dakota's culture reflects the state's American Indian, rural, Western, and European roots. 183. A number of annual events celebrating the state's ethnic and historical heritage take place around the state, such as Days of 76 in Deadwood, 1/8 for Czech Days in Tabor, 185 and the annual St. Patrick's Day and Cinco de Mayo festivities in Sioux Falls. The various tribes hold many annual powwows at their reservations throughout the state, to which non-Native Americans are sometimes invited. 186 Custer State Park holds an annual buffalo roundup, in which volunteers on horseback gather the park's herd of around 1,500 bison. 187 Black Elk Lakota was a medicine man and Heyoka, whose life spanned the transition to reservations. His accounts of the 19th century Indian wars and ghost dance movement, and his deep thoughts on personal visions and Native American religion, form the basis of the book Black Elk Speaks, first published in 1932. Among several editions, a premier annotated edition was published in 2008. 188189 Paul Goebel, a children's book author and illustrator, was based in the Black Hills from 1977. 19 Laura Ingalls Wilder, whose semi-autobiographical books are based on her experiences as a child and young adult on the frontier, is one of South Dakota's best-known writers. She drew from her life growing up on a homestead near De Smet as the basis for 5 of her novels. By the Shores of Silver Lake, The Long Winter, Little Town on the Prairie, These Happy Golden Years, and The First 4 Years, 191. These gained renewed popularity in the United States when Little House on the Prairie was adapted and produced as a television series in 1974. Wilder's daughter, Rose Wilder Lane, who became a well-known writer in her own right, was born near De Smet in 1886. South Dakota has also produced several notable artists. Harvey Dunn grew up on a homestead near Manchester in the late 19th century. While Dunn worked most of his career as a commercial illustrator, his most famous works showed various scenes of frontier life. He completed these near the end of his career. 192 Oscar Howe Crow was born on the Crow Creek Indian Reservation and won fame for his watercolor paintings. 193 Howe was one of the first Native American painters to adopt techniques and style heavily influenced by the mid-20th century abstraction movement, rather than relying on traditional Native American styles. Terry Redlin, originally from Watertown, was an accomplished painter of rural and wildlife scenes. Many of his works are on display at the Redlin Art Center in Watertown. 194. Cities and towns. See also, List of cities in South Dakota and List of South Dakota County. Sioux Falls, with a population of around 192,000, is the largest city in South Dakota. Sioux Falls is the most populous city in South Dakota, with a 2020 population of 192, 517, 195 and a metropolitan area population of 281, 958, 196. The city, founded in 1856, is in the southeast corner of the state. 197 Retail, finance, and healthcare have assumed greater importance in Sioux Falls. 198 Where the economy was originally centered on agribusiness and quarrying. Rapid City, with a 2020 population of 74, 703, 195 and a metropolitan area population of 144, 558, 196 is the second largest. It is on the eastern edge of the Black Hills and was founded in 1876. 199 Rapid City's economy is largely based on tourism and defense spending. 198 because of the proximity of many tourist attractions in the Black Hills and Ellsworth Air Force Base. The next 8 largest cities in the state, in order of descending 2010 population, are Aberdeen 28, 495, Brookings 23, 337, Watertown 22, 655, Mitchell 15, 660, Yankton 15, 411, Huron 14, 263, Pierre 14, 091, and Spearfish 12, 193, 195. Pierre is the state capital, and Brookings and Vermilion are the locations of the state's 2 largest universities, South Dakota State University and University of South Dakota, respectively. With a population of about 14,000, Pierre is the second smallest state capital in the United States. 200 of the 10 largest cities in the state. Only Rapid City and Spearfish are west of the Missouri River. 195-201. Media. See also, List of newspapers in South Dakota, List of television stations in South Dakota, and List of radio stations in South Dakota. South Dakota's first newspaper, the Dakota Democrat, began publishing in Yankton in 1858-202. Today, the state's largest newspaper is the Sioux Falls Argus-Leader, with a Sunday circulation of 63,701 and a weekday circulation of 44,334,203. The Rapid City Journal, with a Sunday circulation of 32,638 and a weekday circulation of 27,827, is South Dakota's second largest newspaper, 203. The next 4 largest newspapers in the state are the Aberdeen American News, the Watertown Public Opinion, the Huron Plainsman, and the Brookings Register, 203. In 1981, Tim Giago founded the Lakota Times as a newspaper for the local American Indian community on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. The newspaper, now published in New York and known as Indian Country Today, is available in every state in the country. 204. The Sioux City Journal also covers parts of South Dakota. There are 9 television stations broadcasting in South Dakota. 205 South Dakota Public Television broadcasts from a number of locations around the state, while the other stations broadcast from Sioux Falls or Rapid City. The 2 largest television media markets in South Dakota are Sioux Falls Mitchell, with a viewership of 246,020, and Rapid City, with a viewership of 91,070206. The 2 markets rank as 114th and 177th largest in the United States, respectively. 206. The state's first television station, Kilo TV, began airing in Sioux Falls in 1953. Among Kilo's early programs was Captain 11, an afternoon children's program. Captain 11 ran from 1955 until 1996, making it the nation's longest continuously running children's television program. 207. A number of South Dakotans are famous for their work in television and publishing. Former NBC nightly news anchor and author Tom Brokaw is from Webster and Yankton. 208 USA Today founder Al Newharth was from Eureka and Alpena. 209 game show host Bob Barker spent much of his childhood in Mission. 210 and entertainment news hosts Pat O'Brien 211 and Mary Hart 212 are from Sioux Falls. Education. See also, List of colleges and universities in South Dakota, List of high schools in South Dakota, and List of school districts in South Dakota. The Coghlan Campanile, a landmark on the campus of South Dakota State University in Brookings as of 2006, South Dakota has a total primary and secondary school enrollment of 136,872, with 120,278 of these students being educated in the public school system. 213. There are 703 public schools. 214 in 168 school districts. 215 giving South Dakota the highest number of schools per capita in the United States. 216. The current high school graduation rate is 89.9. 217 and the average ACT score is 21.8, slightly above the national average of 21.1. 218 89.8% of the adult population has earned at least a high school diploma, and 25.8% has earned a bachelor's degree or higher. 219 South Dakota's 2008 average public school teacher salary of $36,674 was the lowest in the nation. National average was $52,300. In 2007, South Dakota passed legislation modeled after Montana's Indian Education for All Act 1999, mandating education about Native American tribal history, culture, and heritage in all the schools, from preschool through college, in an effort to increase knowledge and appreciation about Indian culture among all residents of the state, as well as to reinforce Indian students' understanding of their own culture's contributions. 221 The South Dakota Board of Regents, whose members are appointed by the governor, controls the 6 public universities in the state. South Dakota State University Sioux in Brookings is the state's largest university, with an enrollment of 12,831 to 22. The University of South Dakota U.S.A. in Vermilion is the state's oldest university and has South Dakota's only law school and medical school. 223. South Dakota also has several private universities, the largest of which is Augustana University in Sioux Falls. Organized sports. Because of its low population, South Dakota does not host any major league professional sports franchises. The state has minor league and independent league teams, all of which play in Sioux Falls or Rapid City. Sioux Falls is home to 4 teams: the Sioux Falls Canaries baseball, the Sioux Falls Skyforce basketball, the Sioux Falls Stampede hockey, and the Sioux Falls Storm indoor American football. 2-4. The Canaries play in the American Association, and their home field is Sioux Falls Stadium. The Skyforce plays in the NBA G League and is owned by the NBA's Miami Heat. The Stampede plays in the USHL, and the Storm plays in the Eiffel. Rapid City has a hockey team named the Rapid City Rush that plays in the Eckel. The Rush began its inaugural season in 2008 at the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center. 2-5 universities in South Dakota host a variety of sports programs. For many years, South Dakota was one of the only states in the country without an NCAA Division I football or basketball team. However, the South Dakota State Jackrabbits decided to move their teams from Division II to Division I in 2007, 2-6, a move followed by the South Dakota Coyotes in 2011, 2-7. Other universities in the state compete at the NCAA's Division II level or in the NAIA. Famous South Dakota athletes include Billy Mills, Mike Miller, Mark Ellis, Becky Hammon, Brock Lesnar, Chad Greenway, and Adam Vinatieri. Mills is from the town of Pine Ridge and competed at the 1964 Summer Olympic Games in Tokyo, becoming the only American to win a gold medal in the 1,000-meter event. 2-8 Miller of Mitchell is a two-time NBA champion who played college basketball at the University of Florida, leading them to the 2000 NCAA championship game his sophomore year and won the 2001 NBA. Ellis of Rapid City played for the University of Florida and 4 MLB teams before retiring in 2015. 2-9-3 Hammond of Rapid City played for the WNBA's New York Liberty and San Antonio Silver Stars before becoming an assistant coach for the NBA's San Antonio Spurs in 2014. 2-3-1-3 Lesnar of Webster is a former heavyweight champion in the U.S.A. Vinatieri is an NFL place kicker who grew up in Rapid City and attended Sioux. 2-3-3 Recreation, a tunnel along the George S. Mickelson Trail in the Black Hills. Fishing and hunting are popular outdoor activities in South Dakota. Fishing contributes over $224 million to South Dakota's economy, and hunting contributes over $303 million to 3-4. In 2007, over 275,000 hunting licenses and 175,000 fishing licenses were sold in the state. Around half of the hunting licenses and over two-thirds of the fishing licenses were purchased by South Dakotans. 2-3-5. Popular species of game include pheasants, white-tailed deer, mule deer, and turkeys, as well as waterfowl such as Canada geese, snow geese, and mallards. Targets of anglers include walleye in the eastern glacial lakes and Missouri River reservoirs. 2-3-6-3-7 Chinook salmon in Lake Ohi. 2-3-7 and trout in the Black Hills. 2-3-8 Other sports, such as cycling and running, are also popular in the state. In 1991, the state opened the George S. Mickelson Trail, a 109-mile 175 km rail trail in the Black Hills. 2-3-9. Besides being used by cyclists, the trail is also the site of a portion of the annual Mount Rushmore Marathon. The marathon's entire course is at an elevation of over 4,000 feet. 1-200 m. 2-4 Other events in the state include the Tour Dakota, a 478-mile 769 km, 6-day cycling event that covers much of eastern and central South Dakota. 2-1 and the annual Sturgis Motorcycle Rally, which draws hundreds of thousands of participants from around the United States. 1-1. The George S. Mickelson Trail is a rail trail in the Black Hills region of South Dakota. It is one of two long-distance trails in western South Dakota, the other being the nearby Centennial Trail, which is generally considered more challenging than the Mickelson Trail. The main trail route extends 108.8 miles 175, 1 km from Edgemont to Deadwood, with approximately 9 miles of additional branch trails, including a 3-mile 5 km paved link from Custer to the Custer State Park completed in 2007. Intermediate points along the route include the towns of Custer and Hill City, and a short branch provides access to the city of Lead. Nearly all of the trail follows the route of an abandoned railroad branch line constructed by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad in 1890-91 and last operated by the Burlington Northern Railroad in 1986. The trail's route is mountainous, forested, and scenic, traversing the heart of the Black Hills and largely within the boundaries of the Black Hills National Forest, although there are parts of the trail that pass through privately owned land, where trail use is restricted to the trail only. 1. The trail alignment includes 4 tunnels and more than 100 converted railroad bridges. There are 15 established trailheads spaced along the route, all of which include vehicle parking, self-sail trail pass stations, vault toilets, and tables. The trail surface is packed crushed limestone and gravel. 2 Lake Ohiau High is a large reservoir behind the Ohi Dam on the Missouri River. It begins in central South Dakota and continues north into North Dakota in the United States. The lake has an area of 370,000 acres 1,500 km 2 and a maximum depth of 205 feet 62 m. 1 by volume, it is the 4th largest reservoir in the U.S. 1. Lake Ohi has a length of approximately 231 miles 372 km and has a shoreline of 2,250 miles 3,620 km. 151 recreation areas are located along Lake Ohi. 3 and 1.5 million people visit the reservoir every year. 1. The lake is named for the 1874 Ohi Indian Mission. 3 Lake Ohi begins just north of Pierre, South Dakota and extends nearly as far north as Bismarck, North Dakota. Mobridge, South Dakota is located on the eastern shore of the central portion of the lake. Bridges over Lake Ohi include US Route 212 west of Gettysburg, South Dakota, and US Route 12 at Mobridge. The former town of Forest City has been flooded beneath Lake Ohi, about 9 miles west of Gettysburg. Prehistoric archaeological sites have been explored in the area, including Molstead Village near Mobridge. It dates to before the emergence of the Arikara, Hidatsa, and Mandan as separate peoples and has been designated as a National Historic Landmark. The trail is maintained by the South Dakota Department of Game, Fish, and Parks. The first segment of the trail was opened in 1991, and the entire route was completed in 1998, and is the first Rails to Trails project in South Dakota. The trail is named after George S. Mickelson, the South Dakota governor who helped spearhead the project. A rail trail is a shared-use path on a railway right-of-way. Rail trails are typically constructed after a railway has been abandoned and the track has been removed, but may also share the right-of-way with active railways, light rail, or streetcars rails with trails, or with disused track. As shared-use paths, rail trails are primarily for non-motorized traffic including pedestrians, bicycles, horseback riders, skaters, and cross-country skiers, although snowmobiles and ATVs may be allowed. The characteristics of abandoned railways: gentle grades, well-engineered rights-of-way and structures, bridges and tunnels, and passage through historical areas lend themselves to rail trails and account for their popularity. Many rail trails are long-distance trails, while some shorter rail trails are known as greenways or linear parks.